All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Critical Oxygen Podcast, where we help you optimize your physiology and maximize your athletic potential. I'm your host, Phil Batterson, and today we are joined by Aaron Geiser. He's a triathlete and endurance coach for EndurIQ, where he coaches pro triathletes like Elizabeth Heinbach and Meg Dorito. Aaron is going to be our endurance coaching expert on the podcast and give us insights for how we can use the science of endurance training in a truly applied way. Aaron Geiser, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on, man.
Phil, I'm excited to be here. It's always nice when we connect, and in this realm, I'm really excited.
Yeah. So just a little bit of a backstory. Aaron and I met so I work as a physiologist for Moxie Monitor, which is a near infrared spectroscopy company. And Aaron and his, it's my job to make sure over at EndurIQ got their hands on some Moxie monitors, and the coaches and their athletes are happy. So him and I met, and, we kind of hit it off, and we've been really, kind of like we were just vibing, from the beginning, like, good rapport, other things. And I was like, Aaron, what do you think about, coming and being a co-host on a podcast that I'm trying to start up? And he agreed. And, this is kind of our test run. So if it goes well, Aaron will be coming back quite a bit too. I wouldn't have asked him to come on if it wasn't. But yeah, so yeah, no, I know I was like, we've talked, like 2 or 3 times, but every time we talk, like, I think it's been great. So, you want to come on the podcast? And he agreed. So yeah, man, I'm really excited to have you on. So, he is currently training for, what is it? Half Ironman Augusta.
That is correct.
Yeah. Building up to that. When is it?
So September 24th. So we're coming up on about 2 weeks out. So start taper here. We're pretty soon.
Yeah. What's your taper looking like?
So next week, looking roughly at about 16 hours worth of training, when kind of I've been holding 23 to 25 for the last probably 5 weeks. So it's about 16 hours, kind of back down on the volume, but still keep a little bit of spiky, tough sessions in there, but just a little bit shorter. And then race week, my wife and I will be traveling down on Wednesday, and really that week it's about a 50%, like it's around 7 or 8 hours worth of total volume, with a couple of primers leading in and just kind of shakeouts the day before. So it's kind of a pretty standard approach that we use at EndurIQ, but just trying to keep everything tip top while backing off some of the intensity and allowing the body to recover and get that energy that you've probably lacked for however long you've been in that, real competitive phase.
Yeah. I mean, especially with working up to, 23 to 25 hours a week, man, that's a lot of volume. And yeah, how did it take you? It probably took you quite a while to build up to that.
Well, I guess, Phil, to be honest with you, I kind of just, even in normal training weeks, I probably hold a good 16 to 18 hours worth of training just normally.
Okay.
So it wasn't necessarily kind of like this huge jump in what I was doing before. It just, most of that additional time too, I really didn't like, I designated it more zone 2 or just endurance work, just to add in that additional endurance level. But it wasn't a great deal of, it's not like I took that 18 and added 5 to 8 hours worth of super intense work. It wasn't that good. So the body just did not seem to, the body absorbed it and responded really, really well. So awesome. The additional work I just kind of took really from my knowledge and how I would do it with another athlete was just kind of making it very, very, almost, you and I've talked about this, I call it guiltily easy work. So you feel guilty of how easy you're going, but it did allow me to kind of move the needle from a physiological standpoint and just get that sharpness that I needed to in some of those more spiky efforts.
Yeah, no, I think that the way that you described. So for everybody who's unfamiliar, and we're going to talk about this, probably every single episode for the next, 100 episodes, zone 2 training, right? Is kind of this like everyone's baby right now. And I think a lot of the times, we really get focused on, oh, well, I have to kind of be at that, like that knife edge of the zone 2 into zone 3. And I think, from my understanding of what Aaron and I have talked about, you know, make it easier than that, because that allows you to accumulate more volume, not overtax your system, still gain physiological benefits, and then be better in your high intensity stuff, right? It's like what people talk about, like the 80-20 rule. But let's say the 80% doesn't have to be at that, like borderline of zone 2. It could be, like 10 or 20% below. You're still getting close to that by just exercising and being on the bike or on your feet, right? So yeah, I'm a
Kind
fan.
of how I sweeping it up a little bit, Phil, is looking at it as the overall management of stress.
Hmm.
And if I have a larger percentage of race pace efforts, or I mean, in this preparatory state, I am spending a little bit more time in zone 3 because that's what I race at, just
Right.
trying to get more comfortable with that.
Right.
But in that, there is 100% less physiological benefits, but there is a greater demand on physiological stress.
Hmm.
And what I look at that additional work as is, I don't want to add necessarily to the, I don't want to take that stress to an unmanageable point.
Hmm.
So by going a little bit lower in that effort level, I'm still getting the response and the return that I want without adding that additional layer of stress, which is what ends up, increasing the likelihood of soft tissue injuries or other things like that. And
Right.
that's where it becomes super, super important.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's good for people to know. And I think it's especially important when you're trying to build your volume, right? You and I told this to an athlete that I've been coaching lately. I was like, look, like you want to do all your runs at 7 flat pace, and we're trying to build your volume from, 25 miles a week to 40 miles a week. We're not going to be able to maintain those 7-minute miles. So it's okay to go 8-minute miles, 9-minute miles. It's gonna you're gonna probably feel like you're going way, way, way too slow. But that's what that's the purpose of it right now. And then once we
Mm-hmm.
actually, because she's a cross country runner, so I'm like, well, once we get into the season, we'll lower your volume a little bit more. We'll sharpen you up with those VO2 max intervals, threshold intervals, those sort of things, and you'll start to feel fine. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just managing expectations, I think, at that point, and then giving people the okay to go slower than what they think is.
Well, and that's one of the fascinating things about coaching individuals all over the world too, is that each one of them is going to be in a different climate. And you have to take that into account
Hmm.
too, because as we all know, if we go out for a run in the middle of the summer, no matter where you're at, you're going to feel completely different than if you go out in a crisp fall
Yep.
day or first part of the spring. Your body's going to react, your heart rate's going to react completely different in those scenarios. And based on that response, it's going to be how much stress load is building on top of your body.
Yep.
And yeah, you might be able to hold 3 days or 4 days of that and feel really, really good. But at some point, there's going to start to be a crack in that foundation.
Yes.
And if you continue to push through, things are just going to start to like crumble on you and fall over.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. I think I think that's something that I've really been focusing on in my uh, critical oxygen Instagram posts lately, is this idea of using your physiology to kind of dictate your training a little bit more. Like, listen to your heart rate. It's not always about wattage, right? Because, like, exactly like what you said, if it's a hotter day or if you're dehydrated, your wattage, like say 200 is, your zone 2 pace. That'd be pretty good. Like that physiological stress could be, 140 beats per minute on some days, or other days when you've gotten a ton of sleep and everything, 120 beats per minute. So
Mm-hmm.
that's going to look greatly different in terms of that stress response that your body is getting from an hour of 200-watt work. But like a lot of cyclists are just like, nope, I know my thresholds, I know my zones, so I'm just going to always ride at that mechanical power, right? And I think there's room for improvement there.
Absolutely. And how many times do you have a conversation with an athlete and they're like, "Well, I'm just stagnant. I'm not getting
Yeah.
better." And then you get into what they've been doing, and it's pretty much what you just
Yep.
said, Phil. And it's like, oh, hey, the light bulb turns on pretty quickly, and it's like, well, here's your issues.
Yeah.
And sometimes that with a sport and sports where it attracts a lot of type A personalities, sometimes that's the hardest. As a coach, that's one of the challenges you have to cross with, is having someone understand that, look, yes, you are successful most likely in your life because you've always pushed the gas pedal to the
Mm-hmm.
floor. In this case, that's not where your best outcome is going to come from.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. And it's interesting because, I think, we with like the Strava stuff out there and all of that, though, people also, it feeds into that type A personality. Oh, well, I need a
Mm-hmm.
PR every single day. And you're like, no. You want a PR on race day. Who gives a shit if you're PRing and beating everybody in a zone 2 workout? That's my opinion, is like, I would rather win on race day and have a bunch of absolute, like, quote unquote garbage looking workouts, where it's like, here's another example. So I ran cross country for a community college, and the fastest guys on the team were the slowest runners during our recovery runs.
Mm-hmm.
Like every single time, the people who were the fastest in practice were the slowest on the course. So, so like, and of course, that's like N of like 5, but maybe.
Well, and I would probably also question the injury risk and history to those individuals that were running slower, if they spent more time in the training room or spent more time out of it. I would guess that they spent more time out of the training room, and probably set themselves up for even longer term success when they got out of college, because they're just more robustly built. They're more like, the legs are more calloused, and they're just able to be more efficient and resilient to breakdowns.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that is one of the big things, is that coach. I was just back home talking to him, and he was like, yeah, the big difference between, those guys that have the big breakout years, like at the Stanfords and the Oregons and other places like that, they always say, I had a year of consistent training where I wasn't injured. And then they have these
Mm-hmm.
breakthroughs, and you're like, shouldn't that be obvious? Shouldn't we be trying to, like, keep people consistent for as long as possible? Because that's going to give us the best chance of having success, right? Because you can kind of fudge the numbers a little bit by, say, for example, like, this is what I used to do, and this is really stupid, so nobody do this. I got it in my head that, oh, if I ate less and weighed less, I would race faster, because I would come off of, like a wrestling season where I went from, like 150 to like 135 or something like that. I was a rail. But then I'd be running PRs at the beginning of the season, but I wouldn't even last the entire season until getting injured. My foot would break. I would have Achilles tendon issues. I would have, IT band issues, those sort of things. But I had it in my head that since I was lighter, I'd be faster. And indeed I was, for a very short period of time. Whereas if I would have eaten adequately and, trained a little bit slower and been a little bit more attuned to what my body was saying, then I probably would have stayed healthy and then made those PRs, like a year or 2 down the road.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can look back, and there's a lot of conversations that can come from COVID, but during that year of 2020, where I had athletes that we had no races to worry about. So it was just focused on training really for that almost 16-month
Mm-hmm.
stretch. And where I really saw a number of athletes that were able to kind of keep the motivation through that stretch, the improvements that they made in that timeline with not having to worry about us kind of ramping up for particular races or anything. It was just solely focused on, okay, here's the weaknesses. Here's what we want to
Mm-hmm.
do. We want to continue to drive this. We want to build this up. You moved the levers that you needed to move, but there was nothing running you down as far as events behind that. And I just see how much that helped individuals that I'm still coaching, that we went through that process. So you're exactly right there, Phil. It's really, it's putting that big block of training down that's consistent,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't necessarily have a bunch of interruptions or other things like that, is where you're going to find the biggest
Yeah.
gains.
Yeah. Has that changed the way, like, did the whole COVID thing, did that change the way you coach athletes and like get them to race and do things like that? Do you have them race less, or did it not really change too much?
Well, I think it depends on the athlete that's coming to you.
Yeah.
Often with the pro athletes, we want to build up to specific races.
Right.
We want to peak at those right race times because, one, whether you're trying to get to a world championship and then perform greatly at that world championship, or there's more involved in that process. But I feel like with the age groupers, there's still kind of that. I love to race. I love to
Mm-hmm.
race. And there's that kind of itch that needs to get scratched from that. So I feel like it's just different due to the athlete and the group that you're working with to answer that question. Like for myself, I enjoy training too much to let events interrupt my training
Yeah.
cycles. So I almost train first and allow some races to then kind of fall into the calendar of how I'm feeling, how I'm shaping
Mm-hmm.
up, and then really kind of 6 weeks out, maybe ramp everything up from. And that's kind of, as we talked about earlier, how I trained for Augusta.
Right.
I was in this point where I could really pivot and go one way or another. I just kind of like that because, hey, my body feels really good. I feel like I can put this stress on it. Okay, there's something 6 weeks out. There's something 8 weeks out, and then tackle that one rather than sign up for 5 or 6 races. Like I had a conversation with an athlete yesterday who's, um, we will complete this year at racing 6 races, and there's that up and down,
Yeah.
and he's just flirting with a little bit of thought of burnout and other
For
things like
sure.
that. And I don't blame him because we started his kind of prep for the early portion of the season back in late November, early December.
Wow.
And it just, when you look at it that way, it's like, hey, man, you really do we need to get you to a break.
Yeah.
So after this one, let's shut it down.
Yeah.
So it really, it just depends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree. Like like from what you said about, like I think there is a tendency for people to over race, just like there's a tendency for people to over prescribe intensity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, like one of the first signs that you're overdoing it is if you're losing motivation to go out and train. That's like should be your first red flag. You're like, oh my gosh, like I have to go train today. Crap. Like, and granted, some days you don't want to train. It's totally true. But if you have something set up, for example, like if you just love training, like here's a good example. So today, so we're in the process of buying a house and then moving into a house, which is really exciting, but we don't have anything. Like we don't we're like I was living in one room in college for the last 4 years. So I have like nothing in terms of like, stuff to fill out a house. So the community that we live in is doing like a community wide garage sale. So there's like 80 houses or something like that that are having a garage sale within our community. So today we like woke up in the morning and I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna do my Instagram stuff, and then I'm gonna get on the bike for a little bit, and then I'm gonna have my conversation with you, and then I'll go, do some garage sale stuff. And then I was like, you know what? It's okay. I don't have to ride and train today. I can do it later after we actually go and try to get some stuff for our house. And, we went to this one place and we needed fencing, and they had like fencing that they essentially gave to us for like $20. We got like a bunch of rugs. We got like pretty much everything we possibly need. And I don't feel guilty about missing, that training session in the morning. Whereas, if this was something where it was like, oh, I'm racing, coming up soon, then like that stress of getting the workout in and doing all the extra stuff, would kind of be building up. And, I'll probably do some sort of workout, in the afternoon or something, and it's because I like it, because I get to sit on my bike. I get to like, I have my bike set up. It's like a little walkway back behind me. And so it's like outside, but it's shaded. And, I'll have my iPhone with my YouTube going, and I'll watch like a YouTube video or something like that, and it'll be enjoyable. It's kind of like a little bit of me time, and that's what I enjoy about it right now. So I think the bottom line, or the moral of that story is like, if you start to enjoy the process a lot more, then you won't have that feeling of I need to race all the time. And once you reduce that, then it's like, ooh, I'm feeling pretty good, like you were saying. So now I'm going to build up for 6 weeks, and then I'm going to go crush this race. And then I'm going to go back to what I love, doing the training. and
and I guess if you take me as kind of that example, I just look at it and my stress levels are so much lower in that sense. It just allows me to kind of enjoy the moment, enjoy what I'm doing, enjoy everything that's around that. And then, okay, I might put myself in the hurt locker for a good stretch of 6 weeks or 4 weeks of that. But that's a small amount of time, where if you have 3 events over the course of like a 3 or 6 month time frame, you're never really coming down.
No.
You're never getting, you come out of that event, and the first thing that you're starting to think about is, okay, I got to get ready for this next one. It's not, okay, let me let the body rejuvenate. Let me kind of get that love back. Let me feel like I don't have to do this. I want to do this. And often when you have that over racing, the athletes feel like, I got to turn this thing back up. And how are you feeling? How's the body responding? Let's put you through a real easy workout, and let's see where your heart rate and how your effort matches up with that heart rate. And if those two are not anywhere on the same page, no, you're not ready. We just need to back it off a little bit. And sometimes when I feel like that's one of those super important reasons to have a coach, is that if you don't, you're more likely to just kind of jump right back into training. You almost kind of shut down your thought of, okay, this feels awful. This should be an easy effort, but it feels tough.
Right.
Well, probably because you just got off the course of one, and you're trying to get ready to get back on a course for another one that's still 6 weeks away or whatnot.
No, I know. It's that revolving door of like, okay, got to ramp it back up. And, I was coaching a guy, and he was the type of person who wanted to sign up for a bunch of races. And then it wound up, he didn't have a good race, and then got discouraged. And then he would DNF a race, or like something like that. And then he'd just be like, dude, I'm not motivated anymore. And I was like, man, we start the season out so motivated every single year. And then by the time we even get to the first race, it's like, so I really had to work with him a lot on managing the stress outside of, just training, right? Because family stress, life stress, work stress, all that all plays into how you're feeling in terms of being able to take on training load. And I know I know for a fact for myself, when I was doing my PhD, my stress was like already, like 90 to 95% as high as it could be. So then anytime I would start training, even though I wanted to, it would be like, yeah, no, like, yeah, I'd like get injured, or I wouldn't be able to like get better, or like other things. So that, and that's like something people, I think, like they don't they don't take into account all the other life stress, and like a lot of people just kind of like white knuckle it, put their head down, like this motivation culture that we have, right, where it's just like, yeah, you just got to work 16 hours a day, and then you got to train on top of that, and you got to wake up at 4 a.m, and you got to do all this stuff. And I'm just like, I'm like, that's just a good way to burn yourself out. Like,
But also on top of that, what do we learn in school in exercise phys is that you're going to recover better when you sleep.
yeah,
And you have these athletes that will, the first thing that they're going to shave off is a good 2 or 3 hours of sleep to get back into a training environment. Well, I hate to tell you, but like athlete, you're not going to improve by that loss of 3 hours of sleep.
no,
So, yeah, I give you credit for being that like structured and that like dedicated to the goal, but sometimes we need to measure what's going to give us the greater return, and
yeah,
sometimes that training bout is not going to be it. It's the rest that comes
yep.
like that you don't think about.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's again coming full circle, right? That's where this like laughably easy, zone, easy stuff comes in, right? Because,
Absolutely.
if you're not feeling up to it, it's like it doesn't make a difference if you do a workout. Well, it could make a difference if you did a hard workout the day where you shouldn't do a hard workout, but it doesn't make a difference if you push it one day after, right?
Right.
You recover one day, you're like, okay, well, my legs are feeling real heavy. I'm feeling exhausted. I'm just going to get on the bike and spin, for an hour and a half and eat a bunch of carbs and get, refueled and stuff.
Well, and even with that, sometimes there is that kind of mental hurdle that needs to get over in that first 15 or 20 minutes of
Yeah.
training too. And I think it is valuable sometimes for an athlete to go in and feel that response. And sometimes you'll work your way through it and then you'll get super motivated.
Mhm.
But then other times, but it's being perceptive enough in that moment to recognize, yeah, today's not the
Yeah.
day. I just need to dial it back and pull it back. Or, you know what, I really was not looking forward to this session before I got in, but after the 10, 15, 20-minute warm up,
Mhm.
man, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
So it's from an athlete perspective, it's really being perceptive. And yeah, it might be on your calendar, but sometimes if you adapt to how your body's feeling, that calendar is going to take you in a wrong direction, where if you adapt, you're going to go in the
Mhm.
right direction. So it's really, I get for the basic athlete who does not have or a knowledge in this field and also doesn't have a coach to rely on, it can be a very, very tough like decision on a day-to-day basis of when is too much, when is not enough, where should I go, what direction.
Yeah.
That's where I think it is critical for having some, at least even if you don't want to have a coach, having somebody that you can bounce ideas off
Yeah.
of, because sometimes just getting a different perspective outside of your own mind can at least make you make a rational and smart decision that ultimately is going to end up playing some more benefit somewhere down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's something that, I've always been really bad at, is like, I'm really good at giving people advice for what they should be doing correctly. And then I'm horrible at taking my own advice, right? Like, I'm like, oh yeah, you need to do way more easy stuff and all of that. And I've slowly been coming around to this idea that, oh, maybe I should hire a coach. Like, if I really want to, start to maximize my, recovery and my potential and other things like that. But, I've always been the type of person who's like, well, I haven't found a coach who I can buy in, with, and I really
Yeah.
trust what they're telling me. because most of the time when I ask my coach, hey, why are we doing this? They're just like, cause I said so. It's not like, it's not like they don't have a good rational explanation for it. It's like, because I'm the authority figure and because I said we're doing this today. I'm just well, okay, you lost all credibility from me. So it's going to be really hard for me to, listen to you going forward. I also think, to go back to your point about, like sometimes you enter a workout and you feel like shit and you're like, oh my gosh, like this is going to be terrible. Your mindset's not there, those sort of things. But then after a warm up, you're like, oh, I actually feel pretty good. And this is something that I've been like, talking ad nauseum about is do a warm up every single day. Like, do a warm up for your easy workouts, do a warm up for your hard workouts. Like, first of all, that's going to get you into, it's a habit. You're forming a habit there. So psychologically, you're like, okay, well, overcoming that barrier to not want to work out, you just do your warm up. And then after your warm up, you're, go into the workout. And if you feel like crap, then go easy. If you feel better, go hard. And that's another thing. Like I just took a poll on Instagram. I was like, oh, how many of you warm up every single day? How many of you warm up sometimes? And it was like the majority was like just sometimes, not every single day. And I mean, if you're going out and doing, if you're doing a super easy ride, then maybe you could get away with it. But I'm still of the mindset is like, well, you're going to need to do a warm up before your race. So you might as well practice doing a warm up every single day to get yourself better at getting warmed up. Because if you practice it, you get better at it.
Like I just when you present that, I have this follow-up question of, so like, to those individuals that say sometimes or not at all, like, what do you like? Are you jumping into 30-30 like zone 5?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many questions that come from like, how do you, if you do not warm up, how do you get into your workout?
Yeah.
And it's just, and that stunning to me.
Yeah, no, I know. It's I think so one of the things that I think is challenging about, say, using things like Zwift and other, say, like I'm doing a lot of cycling training now. So I'm like thinking about this
Mm-hmm.
sort of stuff. So like Zwift or Wahoo has their own, like workout builder and stuff, but a lot of them are just based on erg mode, right? You have your FTP and then your power output sort of stuff. So where it gets challenging, at least for me, is like, I'm like, man, sometimes I need to get on the bike and do my warm up at like 100 watts, like barely pushing the pedals. But other times I feel good at 150. So it doesn't make sense, to have like a quote unquote standardized warm up to mechanical power, because sometimes I just feel like crap. But you can't, right now, we don't have technology that's smart enough to either work on heart rate or even better, work on like muscle oxygenation, which is kind of what I prefer to do for my warm up. And it's still few and far between to be able, unless you have like a fan bike, which isn't applicable to most people, right? They have like a Wahoo with like a Wahoo kicker with their bike mounted to it, and they're just doing the workouts that their coach pushes to them. Or if you're going outside, then it's easy, right? You have your Moxie on or, other NIRS device, and then you just, do your warm up to your physiology or use your heart rate. But that's like kind of one of the barriers that I have, is that you can't necessarily standardize a warm up. So maybe people are like, well, I'll just ride easy, in erg mode and adjust it up and down and then go from there. I don't know.
Well, and I think that like, I'm a big advocate of Zwift. I mean, I lead a couple of rides on that system for EndureIQ.
Mm-hmm.
But last November, I think it was, they made an improvement, or at least I saw it as an improvement, because up to that point they only allowed you to adjust the bias 10%. So either 10% up or 10% down. But at that time they made an adjustment to 25%.
Okay.
That 25% can be a massive range of watts,
right,
in that case. And I feel like it's again the athlete being perceptive, like you talked about, I feel like I need 100 watts in this case. Well, you just got to pull out your phone and dial back down
Okay.
that
So
bias.
you can
But at
control it with
least
your phone. Okay.
you can. You just have to use the companion app in that case. But dial it back, have the watts match up for 100 watts, and then just give your warm up a little bit of time, and then you can always add back the bias in
Yeah.
that case. But I thought that was one, like, they're always trying to continue to be honest, all of these applications are always trying to, if we look back at the development of these applications over the last 5 or 6 years, it's amazing.
Yeah.
But I like some of the newer features that allow you to kind of, man, I just feel clunky. 130 just feels rough right now, so let's dial it back. And you now have the capability to
Yeah.
do that. So it's just recognizing and not being too proud. I mean, I often I tell athletes, really, I care about your output, you care about your output, but the rest of the world, it doesn't matter. Like, they don't mean anything. I would much rather us build to something for you rather than you putting yourself out there and, well, I did this. Well, really, in that case, it doesn't mean anything because nobody cares.
No.
It's when you start breaking down watts per kilo and everything else, it just is. I mean, it levels things out.
Right.
But in that case, the only person that cares about your training most likely is you. And if you do have a coach, it's you and your coach.
Right.
Nobody else. Like, I come home, talk about my bike workout with my wife, and she just looks at me like, "What the hell are you talking about?"
She's like, I heard, it's like, oh, so you worked out today? Like, that's all she heard. She didn't hear, like,
hey, I pushed 330 watts for 5 minutes. She's like, okay, great. That sounds. If you're excited, I'm happy for you.
I know. Yeah, that's so funny. That's it puts it into perspective, and I think that also, that extends to life as well. Is like, the person who cares most about what you are doing is you, and unless you have like a coach or a boss or something like that, nobody else really cares, right? Obviously, don't take this to mean like, oh, go out and do like, illegal stuff or hurt anybody or anything like that. But it should give you, the point of that is that it should give you a little bit of freedom to be like, okay, if I can go easier if I have to, or, maybe I'm going to start a podcast with Aaron, and we're going to see where it goes, sort of thing. Cause that's kind of our, it's just taking leaps of faith and doing things that, like you feel that you should be doing, and have the freedom to do it as well. Didn't mean for that to become a life coaching podcast either, but I think there are parallels between, endurance training and life, and it's something that needs to be highlighted.
100%. And it's like you said, there should be context to the content. It's often people put content to a context before, and if you don't know where you're going, it really doesn't matter. Like, you need to have the destination to get where you need to go. So it's just know that plan, then build up from that plan, rather than just kind of not having anything, just not being guided by anything.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. So with the time that we have left, what I'd like to do is kind of get into, we've had really good conversation about, like coaching and, being an athlete and other things like that. So Aaron, how did you kind of start to get into endurance stuff? We were talking offline earlier about, like traveling baseball team or something like that. So I take it you had a little bit of a team sports background, but then what happened where you kind of made that transition?
So I played baseball through my early 20s. It just rounded everything for me. I was able to travel a lot of different places. I was able to play at a lot of different levels, and that gave me the opportunity to kind of operate at high levels and at levels that most people don't get the opportunity to. And when exposed to that opportunity, you kind of fall in love with certain aspects of, I don't want to say the lifestyle, but just some of the exposure that you have, some of the things that you can get your hands
Mm-hmm.
on. And while completing my degree, I was still playing baseball at that point, but I really was fascinated by the human body. So
Mm-hmm.
I got a sports medicine degree with kind of focus in injury recovery and prevention. That I was able to work in a number of different settings with that. It gave me a lot of different exposure and life lessons and knowledge that I use still to this
Mm-hmm.
day. And at some point, I was exposed to just human performance. And you when you get exposed to human performance, and if you find you yourself were always infatuated with your own maximization of human
Yep.
performance, it kind of is something close to your heart. And in that, I don't know what necessarily triggered that, but I became infatuated with just human performance and trying to make not just myself but those around me
Mm-hmm.
better individuals and better athletes. And with that, it took me to get the exercise physiology degree and then put more there. And at that point, I had just started to do triathlon.
Okay.
And it really, when you're going through that process and you're learning so much about exercise phys and physiology of the human body, endurance sports, you're like, man, there is a really large connection here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of made a natural transition to try to continue to drive myself in that human performance aspect.
Yeah.
And the time that I invested in learning and trying to connect with other individuals within the field, it ended up kind of taking shape of a career.
Yeah.
And about 5 years ago, I got connected with Dr. Dan Plews, who is the founder of Endure IQ. We had some good conversations. At that point, he was actually starting to think about kind of developing a coaching program around him.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a natural kind of developed relationship that he said, hey, do you want to come on board? I'd love to have you. And it's just kind of rolled downhill from there in a very, very positive way, just gaining a lot of momentum and getting into being able to connect those two dots as exercise physiology and endurance sports with somebody that I think so highly of and would put on, the Mount Rushmore of exercise physiologists in the
Yeah.
world. It's just, I've been able to gather so much knowledge in that. And I'll tell you what, the last 5 years have been a little bit of a blur because we've grown so much.
Right.
But it's been a freaking blast, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah. So actually I think the first time we actually met was out at Kona at the coaches talk, because you came up to me and then we just started talking about stuff. And I haven't met Dan in person yet, but I'm hoping to at some point, because he, like we've talked in the past, like he seems to put, a lot of amazing people around him, and then allows you guys to be very successful in terms of Endure IQ being bigger, himself as like an athlete, and then having success with Chelsea Sodaro. Did she won the Ironman World Championships last year, right?
Ironman World Championship.
Yeah.
He also works with Javier Gomez. He works with Aaron Royal. Jan van Berkel just retired,
Yep.
but Jan van Berkel, many-time Ironman champion.
Mm-hmm.
So, he's worked with some phenomenal individuals, and he's gotten to that point where people want to have a conversation with him. And it's nice not just to call him a boss, but call him a friend in that case.
Yeah. And that's really cool. I think I think one thing, that really stuck out to me in that whole story was that, you're like, well, I really got interested in my own physiology and, optimizing my own performance. And that's exactly what I talked to. Another co-host on the podcast, his name is Dr. Robbie Jacobs. He was my master's advisor. And, him and we were talking yesterday about how a lot of people who enter the endurance performance field, or like, just like the applied physiology field, were athletes or are athletes who aren't quite, like they're not professionals. Like they don't have like the genetics to just get them
Yeah.
to like the top level. So then that kind of sends us down the rabbit hole of being like, oh well, what can I do to optimize everything so I can get the most out of whatever I'm given, right? And I think that motivates a lot of us who are like yeah, we're close, but we're not quite there. Not to take
It's
away from you, because like I don't know, you guys don't know, like Aaron's gonna go crush Augusta 70.5, but it's one of those things where not being quite like that genetically gifted, I think really motivates us to want to even do better.
it's so funny that you say that, because if you like you listen to any type of podcast from like Steven Seiler, Paul Larson, Martin Boucher, all these individuals, like one of the first things they say were, well, I was an inspiring athlete,
Yeah.
but I was not there.
Yeah.
So I took this direction. I think Dan's one of those ones that actually, I mean, 100% could have made a living being a
Yeah.
professional triathlete. He's one of the ones that kind of breaks the mold in that sense. But so many of are like, partners in this field have that same start
Hmm.
where I was close, but I just didn't have enough like given ability to make it
Right.
work.
Right. No, I know it is funny, that it is funny that we're all, kind of coming to those conclusions. Cause I think, as a younger athlete, I think, and I held on to this idea for a really long time. Oh, I could do it. I could be there. Um, and then the biggest eye opening thing is I went back and I ran cross country for a community college when I was 24, and I was racing against, 17, 18, 19-year olds. And like, I ran at nationals, and after the first mile, there was already a group of guys that were like 3 minutes ahead of me. It felt like they were like, I was like, oh my gosh, like, okay, now I know what elite is. And then I did some track meets too with them. And I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't even in like the top heat. I was in like the third or fourth heat down in like say a 5K. And there were still guys who were running like 14 flat, and they weren't even the good guys on their team. And I'm over here like, oh, 16:10, that's like, which is like if you look at it, compared to other people, like 16:10 is still really good. But
Heck yeah.
but then when you're like, oh well, these guys in the world championships just ran a 5K in, I don't know, 13 flat, and they didn't even run hard until the last 400. You're like, all right, maybe I don't have, the genetic talent to quite get there, right?
But also there's something to be said of having that, blockage of not allowing yourself to think that you're not good enough to be there
Yeah.
though too.
Yeah.
So like you need to have a little bit of, whether it be ego or whether it just be confidence, you need to feel like you belong there.
Hmm.
And the good thing about it is, and I think that benefits us in the long run, is that we still hold on to that kind of personality,
Hmm.
and it drives us in another direction to allow us to always seek additional information or knowledge to
Yes.
apply that to our athletes, or apply it to ourselves, or apply it to other individuals to allow them to learn as well.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think one thing about that mindset, right, is that it always keeps you striving for more growth. And that is something that I think is arguably one of the most important traits in a human being to have a fulfilling life. if you're going to have a fulfilling life, you have to have this want to grow, to learn, to absorb more things. And, then through that, right, you'll eventually find something that you're like, oh, like I actually am pretty good at this. And, then you're like, okay, now I can establish myself maybe as an expert in whatever it is, so if it's not being a professional, endurance athlete, maybe it's, getting a PhD and doing something like that. Maybe it's, doing something like
Mm-hmm.
yourself, like, coaching professional triathletes and stuff. And also being able to continue to, keep that dream alive of training and uh, training and racing and being the best version of yourself you possibly can. That was another lesson that I had to learn, very early on in my undergrad career was, yeah, you're pretty smart, but like, unless you're putting in a lot of work and enjoying it, like you're nothing compared to, other people who are willing to put in, tons and tons of time of time and work and effort. Um, so, so yeah, again, more connections between life and training and everything. And that's something I've really been exploring a lot lately is like all of these different connections because they're there.
Oh, absolutely. But and it's the one thing I kind of look at that is you don't always have to rush to the direction that you want to go because sometimes it's not the right fit for you.
Yeah.
And sometimes the testing thing out approach works in multiple ways in life
Mm-hmm.
and can bring you to that right pairing. And I just look back and yeah, I've done a lot of different unique things in my life, but I now feel at this point I'm doing what kind of I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And it's I was one of those ones that especially went through my 20s and my early 30s of like, man, what do I want to do when I grow up
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
And eventually it just you trip over something, you get your hands dirty in it, and next thing you know, you're like, man, I love
Mm-hmm.
every single thing about
Yeah.
this. And it then just kind of fuels you on a day-to-day basis. And like you said, Phil, it's you're almost starved for wanting to get more knowledge.
Yeah.
And that's when you know you're in something that's fitting. It is when you just want to continue to learn and how to apply it to other things in your life and those around you.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I think like I'm starting to feel that like, like I've been toying around with this idea of bringing the podcast back because, had, 50 or 60 episodes recorded on another podcast. And I love it. I love just getting to talk to people, getting to learn more about them, getting to explore the science behind, endurance training and adaptation, everything. But then, things got busy with the PhD and then I was like, I really think it would be a lot of fun. And it energizes me so much to be able to connect with, awesome people like yourself, awesome people like, my master's advisor, Dr. Jacobs, and I have a few other people who I want to be continued guest hosts because I think that's kind of what I get jacked on is how can I get all of these perspectives on, endurance training, endurance performance, and just, performance in general, and how can I share that with people in a setting, that is kind of, open for everybody to enjoy and look back at and all of that. So, I think that's a perfect place for us to kind of wrap up for today. Um, the like I will say in the podcast, multiple times, the whole goal of this podcast is to help give you listeners as, coaches, athletes, interested individuals, multiple different perspectives on how to use and utilize the science, the physiological sciences in order to make yourself better. So with that, if you guys have any questions, comments, shoot me a DM, critical02 on Instagram. All of these videos are going to be posted on YouTube. So if you're on YouTube, drop a comment down below. If you have topics that you want Aaron and I to talk about, that are a little bit more on the applied side of things, let us know. Aaron, where can people find you on social media?
I am on Instagram at Try a Geiser.
Try a
So that is
Geiser.
Try A Geiser.
Awesome.
And I no longer have a Facebook account. So really, I'm just operating in that Instagram world over anything else.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. And we're going to roll out all these podcasts to all the different places. But if you want to get in touch with either Aaron or I, you can find us on our Instagrams. And until the next one, we really appreciate everybody listening. And like I said, if you guys have any questions, let us know.
Appreciate you having me on, and I look forward to the future. And everybody, I look forward to being part of the community.
Yeah, man, this is going to be so much fun. Thanks.